Hi, Rochelle. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
I have had the pleasure of working with today's guest before. Rochelle Stanley is a medical, intuitive, and spiritual teacher, which is really doesn't even shed light, I think, on a fraction of what you do, but hopefully we can dive into that today. Um, so, Rochelle, I would love to start today hearing about your story, right? I always find when we find our purpose, it has usually some impetus behind it of what we went through to find what we're supposed to be doing. So, to just share about yourself and where you're coming from, would you share with our audience how you got into your work?
I will. I was really intuitive at an early age. Like I believe that we all are. I thought it was a natural way of being. I thought that people would know, I'm 53 almost, and so we didn't have caller ID, you know, and I would know who was calling on the phone. I would know if someone's coming over, even if my mom didn't know they were coming over. And she's like, "No, Aunt Nikki's not coming today." I'm like, "Yeah, she'll be here in a couple minutes," and then she'd show up.
Mm.
And my mom would give me these looks like, "What?" And she would tell me, "You should really do something with this." But I didn't know what she meant because I just thought everybody was this way. And then I hit puberty and I was embarrassed that I was this way. And I really tried to like shrink and hide from it.
Mhm.
I had a belief in God for, most of my life. And I kind of turned away from that energy because I was so embarrassed of like, I talk to God and, and I see these things and I think I can heal animals. And when I was in my 30s, I started to go through a really large spiritual awakening. And I find that that's a pretty common theme, mostly for
Mm.
women around that age, is to really
Mhm.
start this opening and spiritual awakening.
Mm.
And it was on a cellular level. I couldn't say no to what was happening. And I kept hearing, that whisper, "You're a healer and it's time to get to work." And at first I was like, "No, you can't make me. I'm not doing that. I live a normal life." Um, I was married at the time. My kids are really small, and I was inundated with contact from source and angels and masters putting me through these healing processes for myself, for what I'd been through in my life. And my husband at that time, I'm divorced now, but it was too difficult for him to conceptualize what was happening to me. It was too woo woo.
Mm.
And there were a lot of different things in the way of that marriage, but I ended up leaving the marriage and 2 weeks later starting to take healing courses, like one after another, just gobbling up information. And within a 9-month period after I left my marriage, I was launched. I had an office space and people were coming to see me, and I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, I don't know why they're showing up, but people were changing and growing and waking up. And I was just thirsty for it. I was living it, as much as I could, raising two kids by myself. And yeah, I just went on for years to study and teach the work that I do. And I'm no longer hiding in the closet. I'm really proud and I like to help other people too. Because some people are like, "Hey, look, I think I'm psychic too, but I don't want to tell anyone," Um, and so I'm here to say it's natural and it's so instrumental in having a healthy life. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you share it seems to be around your 30s because that's when I would say I had my spiritual awakening. And I've always been hesitant. You could say I'm like spiritually in the closet, like one foot in the closet, because, when you first learn about these things, it almost feels like a remembering where I was doing the same thing you were. I couldn't get enough of podcasts and books about past lives and near death experiences. And just, it was almost like this I cannot get enough of this subject. And for a long time, looking at oracle cards or things that really speak to me that make my soul so happy feels weird. And I'm still walking through this. It feels almost like, oh, woo woo is the best term that is just, it's such an off putting thing now to even use that term because it puts us in this box of weird. And not to jump right to something so deep, but someone drew this connection for me before about in religion, the Holy Spirit is a piece of the religion that's accepted and just not talked about very often. And I think that's what I feel I connect with, is a Holy Spirit and energy that's present but not seeable. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. That's kind of where I am, and I just resonate with what you're saying of just feeling like you're gobbling it up. So just to kind of clarify for people listening, speaking to an intuitive or a clairvoyant might be a new concept, right? This is something I've always been really attracted to. I light up. I can't get enough of it, but this could be really new for some people. So could you just share a little bit of light on, if someone were new to this field, and maybe it's a different for everyone, but for you, what does that mean? Is it, I think you said you hear things. Do you see things? Do you feel things? What do these gifts look like that before you said you knew your aunt was coming over. So there's a knowing, right? I don't know all the
Claircognizance. Yeah.
cognizance. Okay. So
Yeah.
I just want to hear you talk about what that looks like for you.
Well, so we have 4 strong intuitive centers. There's more than that, but there's 4 like well known that people accept. And so there's, excuse me, your claircognizance, and that one hangs out in your pineal gland. That's the gift of knowing, and that's really strong in me. So you just know things. You don't know why you know, but you know it so much that no one can sway you. And that can cause complications with intimate relationships in your life because the decisions you're making, they're like, that doesn't make sense. But it totally makes sense to me. It's the right direction. Then I'm a strong seer, clairvoyant, and that resides in the mind's eye. And I really think everybody's clairvoyant. They just don't know it. And they put too much pressure on that gift. And they're like, I can't see it, I just see black. And there's reasons why that could be blocked, but it's actually one of the easier ones to access. And it's the one that everyone's like, I want to be clairvoyant. I want to see it all.
Yes.
Um, there's clairaudience, which I feel really hangs out right above the ears. And some other intuitives that teach this also think that it hangs out here. Regardless, when I say I hear stuff, it's more like my knowing and my seeing get interpreted inside of my brain. So it's not like I hear the voice of God inside of my brain. It's silent, but messages come in. The clairaudience, and that's how it works for most people. Like you can hear your angels like messages inside of your brain, and it's not like they're on a microphone speaking in there. It just is like a set in kind of knowing that gets whispered in the brain. But you can also hear spirits outside of yourself as well. So there's been times where there's been like ghosts around me, and I can hear them clearly speaking. So that's really the only time I hear outside of myself, like physically. And that's because when people pass away, their frequency is not that much different than ours. So it's a little easier to tune into that frequency. And just a little side note that when you are clairaudient, sometimes it sounds like you're hearing static of a radio outside of your head. So you're not crazy. It's just you're tuned in a little bit more to the spirit world. I could tell you have a question. There's just one more psychic sense, but before I blather on, is there something you want? You can tell it's like my topic.
I have so many questions. I'm going to have questions in my brain the entire conversation. So you don't ever feel like you have to stop. I want you to keep going. And when you stop, whichever first one comes to me, I'll share. But I guess that's, what was my question when you were talking? Did that scare you at a young age when you first were aware that you were hearing past energies?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because you don't know. I mean, what kid knows that that's what's happening, and parents don't understand. And I unfortunately see this all the time with parents who have very intuitive children. Sometimes the way they behave is because they're actually able to see ghosts or ancestors or angels, and there's not an explanation for that. And then parents are like, oh, no, it's just your imagination, or oh, no, there's nothing there. And that crushes that little spirit, that child, because they're really sensing this, hearing it, seeing it. They know that it's there. And so giving parents the tools to say, tell me more. What are you seeing? And what do they look like? And what does that feel like when they're in the room? Does it feel like love? Does it feel scary? What do you think their intentions are? Like, you're not feeding their imagination. You're being an intuitive investigator for them to help them.
That's so important. I have to share this story because it perfectly fishtails. I had the opportunity to work with you. We had a wonderful session. I don't know if you remember any of it. I know a lot of times when you're channeling, people can't remember, but something you told me was that there was, we can call it an outside negative energy that kind of stands behind my son and scares him in his room at night. And you were pretty clear that he can feel it and it scares him. And you helped kind of dissolve that. And then recently, last week, he said he came into my room a little scared. He's very brave, but he's a little scared and said, it feels like something is behind me when I look over my shoulder, which is verbatim what you told me. I've never told him that. Of course, I'm not going to pass that on to him and implant something. He came to that conclusion naturally. And that's kind of what I said. And well, one, we should talk to Rochelle again about what's revisiting, but two, are you scared? What does it look like? And he kind of described it as a wolf that was lower to the ground. And it's just interesting. And I totally fully recognize that this conversation feels very comfortable with you, but people listening, this might sound so weird, but I don't know what else to say except this is my truth. And there is not just what meets the eye. I'm a firm believer in that. And whether you have to think about we're on a floating ball in the sky and how we got here and where the galaxy ends, whether you have to think about these huge concepts to have this realization, there's so much more than meets the eye. And that's why I call this whole podcast the wellness frequency, because we don't talk to people on a phone that are right there. There's an energy, an invisible energy connecting us through the phone. Anyway, I just had to acknowledge that because this feels very comfortable with you, but this might be, it's worth acknowledging, this might be a very odd concept. So that's worth bringing up now. How do you communicate to people who are skeptical? Because there's like a wound in me that shrinks a little bit when I open myself up vulnerably about something like this, and it just feels, you get this look like you're a little crazy. How do you respond to that or deal with that?
Honestly, I don't give it much attention. I just know that's not where I'm meant to focus my energy. So if someone's not receptive to me and who I am as a person, I understand I'm not really meant to share my energy with them. And they're not going to receive what it is that I have to share. So I'm not offended, right? But I understand that my meat, my juiciness won't serve there.
Totally. That's a really good way to think about it. I think I need to be comfortable sharing what I'm comfortable sharing with to an extent, and then just not, it's like having expectation, just not having the expectation that you're going to be met with everybody because not everybody is there. So anyway, something else I wanted to share in our session was that you picked up on some stubborn viruses I was exposed to in utero, which is on a root cause foundational wellness, which is what I do. We talk about that all the time. We can be exposed to things in utero. And I have dealt with a viral load for a long time. And you picked up on that. You also picked up on metals in Hayes and myself, which for all those people that need proof, that actually came back in testing that we did in hair tissue mineral analysis testing. So I'm just so thankful to be able to talk to you on many levels about this. But I would love for the audience to hear, what does it look like to work with you when you say you're a medical intuitive, just kind of what that means and what are the things that you find and how do you help people address them energetically?
So the way that I work best usually is people will come to me with something that's off in their life. It could be health, it could be relationship, it could be money, it could be that they're intuitive, they're feeling stuck. Sometimes they need help with a client. There's lots of reasons people find me. I always start with a body scan. And so I believe that I go into the Holy Spirit's light. I don't like to say I'm religious, although I believe in God, but I think what God is to me is different than what it might be to a lot of other people. I feel like God's essence, God's energy in the work that I do. And so when I'm scanning you, I'm scanning your light body. Our light body is pure, bright, white light. And your light body will show me areas that have variants of light. So I know there's a lack of harmony in different areas of the body. And so I'll send my focus there and have a conversation with that area of the light body, which connects me to the physical body and the emotions that are hanging out there. That being said, viruses have their own frequency, metals have their own frequency, cancer has its own frequency, digestive stuff has its own frequency. So I'm just so well trained now that I can feel it. I was at a gathering last night and this woman was talking with me and she's like, if I work with you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'm really sensing you got bit by a tick. Like I feel tick energy with you. And she's like, oh my God, yeah. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that she has Lyme's, but I'm sharing this because there's a frequency that comes through when I'm working with people. I'm like, oh, I feel tick. Oh, I feel autoimmune. Oh, I feel like cancer brewing in this person's body. One of the most remarkable things that I've experienced was I was facilitating at a retreat, working with tons of people I didn't know. And this woman came up in front of the crowd for a body scan and for a little work with me, and her brain looked like jello, like when I scanned it. And I didn't know her, and I didn't feel like it was appropriate to tell her, look, I feel like there's like brain cancer happening here. So she knew one of the other event facilitators. So I contacted that person and said, do you think she'd be comfortable with me sharing everything that I got in the read? And so we were able to connect. And disease has 4 layers, and the first 3 layers are energy. Well, the energy is attached to emotion. Once that emotion goes through these energy stages, the body's whispering, 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 and then it shouts, and then it manifests into a disease. So we caught it before it manifested into a disease. We caught the energy stage of brain cancer. And we found a belief. Her husband had built this amazing architect type to elevate people's homes off the ground so that they wouldn't deal with flooding. Just stunning, stunning technology. And she had a belief that she would die for this. She would die for this. And they're pushing so hard to get this out in the world to third world countries. And so that she was literally creating death because she believed in this project so much. And so there's good in that, like determination and tenacity and devotion and commitment. And we want to keep those things, but without the I will die for this, energy. So, anyways, tangent, I do those, but it was a powerful learning for me and for this woman.
That's incredible, which totally goes back to a core belief of mine that words have energy, words have frequency. And that's the perfect example of it's for a good purpose, but there is an energy behind I will die for this. And that's
Mhm.
why you hear about just be careful of the words coming out of your mouth because you are putting into existence something. And I can be self-deprecating and I can tell jokes. And sometimes I'm like, I really have to work to retrain my brain because I might be being jovial when I say something, but those words are not positive. And so it's a practice of trying to teach yourself how to be careful. And those core beliefs, you spoke right to one of my questions, which is, most of the time, if not 100% of the time, based on your work, a disease state or physical imbalance goes back to a core belief issue, a negative emotion, a negative experience, right? This is all like it goes back to a core energy, which I got so wrapped up in this work at one point, I almost gave up what I do, because I was like, what is the point of my work if we need to get to the core energetic root? And I have come full circle and I understand that I have a purpose and I need to stick to what I'm good at and I'm helping people. But if, people are struggling chronically and not getting better, it comes back to they're not addressing something emotionally or energetically. And I love to refer them to people like you. So do you find that these common imbalances, call it a parasite, a metal toxicity, environmental chemical, do they have common root causes? Like it always comes back to grief with cancer or whatever, or is it really not that systematic with
It's so
people?
systematic. It's crazy how systematic it is. Each cancer has its own belief systems. Cancer, like if it's in the colon, it's got different emotions. If it's in the breast, it's got different emotions, blood, different emotions. It's really fascinating. Viruses are everything's alive and living, right? And parasites, they don't want to die. So they're projecting to people that have parasitic infections. Mold does this too. Stop taking that medicine, it's killing you. And so these people won't finish treatment to get better because the projection of this other living entity or organism in their body is saying, this is killing me. You don't know the difference between their thoughts and your thoughts. And so you stop treatment because you feel, and it feels like you're being killed too. I don't know if you've ever had to do a parasitic cleanse, but you kind of feel like you're dying, you know? So yeah, I don't want anyone to feel defeated. And it's not every thought that you think is constantly creating reality. It's the consistency in the thought. And
Mm.
your core wounds are actually there to teach you. I think they're divine. I have this theory that before we come into this body, we decide what we want to learn, like our soul contract, what our soul wants to learn, which would be virtues. And then we get these core wounds anchored into our system, and we start to learn our earth curriculum. And so don't be afraid to think negative thoughts. Just be mindful of the thoughts you're thinking, and then try to think about, what am I learning from this core wound? Because the core wound happens, and your whole life, you start to attract situations and characters in your life that add to that core wound until you
Mm.
figure out what you're learning. So I say, mind the mind, clear, cancel, delete those thoughts that don't serve you, and really sit in the heart of it. What am I learning from this experience that's positive, right?
I love that. That's so important. And takes me to another question. As you mentioned the four, so three energy bodies and then a physical body that an imbalance has to get to. With your work, and this is what I also want listeners to understand, if you catch something on the energetic level, um, and you clear it for someone, I want to understand what that looks like. And then say it gets to the physical level. With your work being energetic, are you able to clear it at the physical level, or would it have to be someone like me coming in and then working on the physical while you're working on the energetic?
So I think all help is wonderful. And I think every body and every spirit has, different ways that they've decided they're willing to heal. And some people will only heal if they heal it themselves, right?
Mm.
But the work that I do heals on an emotional level, which then heals on a physical level. So people will see me with a full-blown disease, or they'll see me and they don't even know they're sick, or they're like, I just don't feel good. It just varies. But I can tell you that a few things can get in the way of like full recovery. One is the way you believe. And if you can't find the root of the belief, then you're not going to get better. And sometimes it takes a while to be vulnerable enough to reach that root. Sometimes people just aren't ready. The next piece is, sometimes it's contract. Like, this person's decided that this is going to be the way of life. And sometimes they're gaining so much medical expertise in this lifetime, even though they're not a doctor, that they're bringing it back for research to take it into another time, another field, to bring more knowledge and information through. So yes, it can heal, but a few things can be in the way of that.
That's so interesting. I actually had an intuitive tell me once that I had a contract. Now, she said I could break this, but I had a contract to learn through imbalances in my body, because why I am so confident and grounded in my work today is because I have walked through so many things. And I'm not going to say I have not suffered a chronic illness the way other people have, and I'm grateful for that, but I have walked through a whole bunch. And apparently there was a contract of, that is how I'm going to learn. And I will tell you, you know something deeply when you walk through it.
I
I
mean,
heal.
you're an expert because you've walked through it, and you gain the most compassion, I think, when
Mm.
you have the experience yourself. And I'm not saying contract suffering, but really we're learning mostly through our own experiences how to help ourselves, and then extend that to helping other people, for sure.
It's so true. The empathy, I feel it in my whole body when someone comes to me with weight loss resistance or polycystic ovaries or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, gut issues, postpartum issues. It's like, oh, I feel that in my cells because I walked through that and wouldn't want to do it again. But aren't I so lucky that I get to help you from this place? And I find the more practitioners in the holistic space I talk to, they all have a story. They all have a pretty intense story. So this is common. This is wildly common.
So
And I
yeah,
just had
there's a
to.
group consciousness among people that do the work that you do, right?
Mm,
And then
that
it
makes
would
sense.
be so for every field, right?
Okay, that makes so much sense. Yes, and it's just, and that's why I love starting the podcast off with what's your story, because we're coming from a place of knowing. And I have to loop back to the parasites because they're so pervasive. People still don't think they really understand how common they are. And I really think that's one of the main root causes for self-harming thoughts, mood imbalances, those, I had a client this morning actually kind of gave me an SOS call and said, I am feeling very down and depressed and this feels cyclical. And I was like, I have to be honest with you. These things are real triggers, but we haven't gotten to the root. You have not done a cleanse. It could be a parasite that's just coming in and telling you negative things. So I just love that you're so educated in the space where I work, even though that's not even the work you do. It is, but it's so synergistic and beautiful. And I love having people like you for my open-minded clients who can get deeper healing. That's really the whole point of me having you here and having this podcast is I've got to try so many healing modalities and I love them all. And I think everyone has this unique individual recipe and you might be an ingredient in their recipe to continue their healing. So I want to shed as much light on your gifts as possible. So on that note, we talked about some common things you see. Oh, I did have one more question about the cancer. Do you feel comfortable telling people cancer, or do you usually avoid that word because it just is an energetic blueprint, but there's so much fear surrounding it? Have you been able to help people without using that word, or do you find that's kind of a word you have to use to tell people like where they are so they are driven to make changes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm very gentle with my words when I work with people. I never want to plug in a belief because people can take something and really run with it in a positive or a negative way. So typically if I'm feeling cancer, because I can't diagnose legally, right? And I can't prescribe legally. I'll say, this has a feel of this could lead to what I've seen in the past is, right? So like breasts show up, a lot of fungal energy, and that's like a stage manifestation of breast cancer. And that fungal energy that I see in the breast is tied into resentment. And women, a lot of what's happening with breast cancer emotionally is resentment because we're so conditioned as women to give and to nurture, and we end up, and there's reasons why we give too, like there's motive behind it that we don't always understand. But then the people in our lives get used to us giving and they don't give back, and over time we feel taken advantage of, we feel used up, and we start to get resentful instead of saying, actually, I need this, right? And I'm setting this boundary and I'm saying no. So I'm gentle how I say it. Some people will come to me with cancer, and so we already know it's out there in the open. And obviously, I encourage each person to also seek, the Western medicine if that's their path too. But I feel really blessed that I've seen breast cancer dissolve in several women. It's one of those cancers that's, willing to shift, as long as the woman's willing to shift and take the action steps that the cancer's trying to guide her to take.
That's
and
incredible.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's always this lifetime, this conscious resentment, or maybe a little bit subconscious resentment, or have you ever found that resentment kind of passed down from ancestors where it's in our cells, it's kind of living maybe in our fascia? Maybe we're not resentful, but maybe our grandmother was resentful, or mother was resentful, and so we can manifest that? Or do you usually find that it's in this lifetime, this body?
It's interesting because I think it can be a combination of both. I think you're working on your genetics all the time, right? We are them, right? All their knowledge is in our DNA, and there's benefits to that, but we're also here to break those chains, right? We don't have to continue to live that. So I think that bleeds in somewhat, but I find that if we're really addressing what's going on for you in your life and your reasons why you have resentment, it just backs it out and clears it up. And there's different things you can say, like I'm all done and complete with working out my family's karma. You can do that, you know.
A good one.
You can free yourself from that. My grandma, I love her. She's 94 years old, but I noticed that there was a lot of bitterness with her, and then a lot of victim stuff within her. And for most of my life, I didn't notice that in me, but that's because I was conditioned to be nice. And I thought getting mad meant that I wasn't nice, right? I thought speaking up was disrespectful. That's how I was raised. So I was suppressing anger that I didn't even know. It was invisible to me until I started to wake up and go, oh my gosh, I have all this anger and resentment inside of my body, bitterness like my grandma, and I don't want to be 94 and carry those energies. So I could see it in her and not in me until I started to do my deep dive into my own wounds. Yeah.
Interesting. I think about that a lot because I'm pretty naturally non-confrontational. I have big feelings and big thoughts, but it's quite uncomfortable for me to confront someone. And I don't know if that's everyone feels that way. I surely don't think everyone feels that way because I was raised by a strong mom who I always felt protected by. She was the bear that she does not have fear, at least not that I see. She doesn't. So I am the opposite, and I will do a lot of things to avoid a confrontation. And I don't want to say I worry about that, but I think about that a lot because if you're not expressing these things, they live in your body. And I think that's something I know it's something I'm still working on. So in your life, if we can get personal for a moment, do you have the clarity you have with other people, or do you feel blocked sometimes? Because even as a practitioner, I have a hard time treating myself and my family. Do you have that same clarity, or do you feel blocked a little bit with yourself? I guess I'm curious the advantages of being this powerful intuitive. You're just like, should I go to the grocery store? Like in all jokes aside, like I love that. Like, how do you
So
use it?
you can actually use it that way. Like, which route is best for me to travel today? What's it going to be like at the airport? What are my flights going to be like? If I make my decision doing it this way versus this way, what will have the best outcome for me? So I do use it in my life like that. I do scan my own body and I can clear energy and do belief work on myself, but there's points where I get afraid and get stuck and I get shut down, or there's something I don't want to look at, and that happens too. And with my kids, because this has been their life, right? They were like 4 and 7 years old when I started to really do this work, and I used to teach classes from home. I mean, they were like in it, you know? And my oldest daughter, she was probably 8 or 9, and she was having severe rib cage pain. And I got tense and stuff. I'm like, okay, let's take you to my chiropractor who practiced directional non-force. Nothing happened. Let's take you and have this myofascial release. Nothing happened. Let's take you and do that. And nothing happened. And she's like, Mom, this is so uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay. And so I sat with her and went into her body and talked with her ribs. And I was like, you're so wonderful. I love you so much. You're so strong. Just started babying her rib cage. And she's like, Mom, my ribs are moving. She was like freaking out. And I was like, it's okay. And I just stayed with it, and her pain went away and hasn't been back. And she's 19 now. So
Oh,
I kind of like will resist because they're my kids and they're really close to me, and I'm afraid I'm going to
yes,
let them down. And
yes.
same with my pets, right? I'm like, this is so much pressure.
That's what it is. I feel the same way with my little dude. I think I really dragged my feet until recently. Really until recently. He's 6, about some stuff I've known he's had gut stuff since he was little. And yeah, maybe that's what it is. You just verbalized it well. It's like being afraid of letting them down, feeling overwhelmed because they're so close to you. I mean, I always describe it. Kids are like having a limb. And when they're not with you, you feel as if a limb is missing. And it's the biggest gift, but it has blocked me before. But I love what you just said because it reminds me of the experiment. I think a lot of people have heard about it, but you've got 2 plants. One plant you cuss at, you say negative words, you hate that plant. And one plant you love it and you say so many nice things, and you give it the same sun and the same water, and the plant that you talked trash to dies.
It breaks my heart even just to hear about that. But yes.
But this is how the world works. These words have energy, and living things respond to that on a cellular level. And so the world of healing and wellness can get complicated and it can feel heavy, and I totally get that. But we can also make it a little bit more simple with positive feelings, energy, taking care of ourselves, taking care of others, and also just like believing in things, believing that you can heal, believing that you are worth it, believing that you're amazing. It's not the biology belief. It's there's a book I'm thinking of. I'll have to Anita Morjani. Do you know her book?
I don't know.
It's basically about self-love. Um, I will share the link below, but this is one of the first books that just made me look at myself like, wow, you are the bomb. Like you are amazing. It's not that I feel like that's so rare too for people to think that of themselves, which is a whole nother conversation of how sad that is. But to like revere yourself, it's like the most healing thing. So I'm going to share that book. It's just failing me the title of it right now. But anyway, this I could I could talk to you, I'm sure you could tell, for like a week. I have so many questions. But what I really want to do today is showcase your talent. I basically ran this past you before, and I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with it. But I truly think seeing to believe or hearing to believe is really important. So I wanted to be vulnerable and allow myself to open up to a scan. If you felt ready, we can do it now. We can do it later. If that still feels aligned for you, I really want people to see how you work and how I receive it and just what that looks like. Because until I did a reading myself or heard the same thing on someone else's podcast, I felt very confused at what this could be. I think there's fear in people. I think people are so afraid, oh, intuitive means they're going to tell me something bad. And I've probably in my many years of doing this had one not positive experience. And I think I just rushed into a reading too fast. You just have to be very careful who you place your energy with. And now I'm super discerning. And nothing bad came of it, but she left me feeling sad. And I don't think that's not the point of this. So if you felt comfortable, Rochelle, I would love for you to show people your gift.
Sure, but I have to get this one thing out of my mind
Go.
is that when you asked about the psychic senses, we got to the three, and I just want to just address the fourth one before we move in real quick in
Yes.
case listeners are like, what was the fourth one? And
Thank you.
so clairsentient is the gift of feeling, being an empath, and that's inside the solar plexus, and that's also another amazing intuitive gift, psychic gift, and you can gather a lot of information from people. That I would just caution that for all of the empaths out there in the world, you can feel it, but don't take it in. Right? Sense it without taking it into your body, because sometimes you don't have the tools and the equipment to remove it from your body, and you take on other people's stuff.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I would call myself an empath. I think if I had to pick one, I feel things big. And I will link that. Anita Morjani has a second book on empaths. And I think that is the gift. And it's also a place of vulnerability. I can totally attest to that. In the past, if a client cried, I'd cry. And it was just, I was there and I was meeting them. And now I say a prayer before I meet with people, and I say I would like, my higher self to connect with their higher self, right? I'm protecting my energy. I want to come from a place of meeting them at their greatest, not like down in the trenches of physically meeting
I
them, because I've
love
done
it.
that. I
Yeah,
have
I
matched
love
them,
it.
and it
Yeah.
leaves you feeling very depleted and very not well. So thank you for bringing that back. And I did, when you were talking about that, had one other thought. You said most people think they don't have the clairvoyance is
Clairvoyant.
that when you see. And when I've done past life regressions and things, I put myself in that category where I don't feel like I see anything. I always see black. I have a very powerful brain, and I do think it blocks me. So that was a good word of encouragement that I probably fall into the camp of keep trying. It's there. You're just probably blocking yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes that's really playing into some fear, and often fear from a past life.
Oh, that
Yeah,
resonates.
but I have so much more to say, but let's go ahead and get into the body scan. Okay.
Okay.
So just a quick explanation for people. What I do is basically I go into this beautiful white light that we all have access to, and you would ask me via email, like if someone's religious or they're Christian, how would this like translate to them? And so I'm very spiritual. My beliefs are probably unique or not unique. I believe that every god and every goddess exist. Every ascended master exists. All the archangels exist. I believe there's truth to all of this. I believe there's a god, a guy in robes. And then I think there's like the creator of all that is. That's been my experience. And so I go into the energy of the creator of all that is, which is light, and it's intelligent. And anyone can find out any information. I don't use it for any malicious intent. It's not in my being to do that. And so I feel like if people have that intent, they won't be able to access this level of intelligence and consciousness to get information for other people. I'm always asking for the truth. And that means that I have to keep my energy neutral. I can't have an opinion in this. I can't have feelings about this when I'm doing a read, or I block the read. So I go into this light. I work in the energy, well, the law of compassion and then the law of truth, and then in creator's light. I'm there, like in my light body. Then I see you there in your light body, in our purity, in our innocence, without the egos. We're in this mystery that's really beautiful, and we're open and receptive to the truth. So that's what I'm doing.
That's so beautiful, and I'm so glad you touched on the religious part. I went to Catholic school growing up. I've studied religion, and being in the South, a lot of people are very religious, and I just don't think it's separate. I think this is a expanded version of that. I love the Bible. I, like you said, believe the ascended masters were real. Jesus, those are all such incredible ancient truths, and I look at it as like we're all together as opposed to we're all fractionated the way I think that a lot of people look at it. I don't look at it as separate. I think we all have our iterations of like this wholeness. So thank you for beautifully saying that.
So lastly, the first time I took this meditation, which was I studied theta healing and got my certificate in science and my master's in theta healing. And this meditation process that I followed was how I accessed this plane of existence, or the unified field, whatever people want to call it. And I was told that no one could go in my ball of light with me in the meditation, but Jesus popped in my ball of light. And I was like, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And he's like, just quiet, like, it's all right, just chill out, And so we're traveling up in my ball of light. And then we get just below the light of creation, the highest intelligence, whatever you want it, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call this. And he takes his hand like this. He goes, there you go, and points up, there you go ahead. And so if someone is Christian and feels like that it's wrong to access this, well, Jesus took me there. So I know I have, like, it's my birthright to go here and receive information and help people,
That's perfect. You've got the actual passport.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Go ahead, access this. So
that's amazing.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is go up and just say hi to your body, and we'll do a brief scan, and I'll let you know the information that's coming through. Usually when I'm scanning people, they actually don't feel it. If they feel anything, it's warmth and tingling energy, because I'm not looking for what's wrong in the body. I'm not going, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with her? I'm just like, let's just see, let's just say hi to her light body. And so I'm going to go say hi. And today there's a lot of busy work in your field, which makes sense. Like, I see some smaller kind of fairy energy on the outside of the body. And we talked before we got on the podcast of like the things you're going to be taking care of when you get off of this podcast. So that makes sense. So I typically start from the brain and work my way down. And sometimes the body will call me to other areas where it wants more attention. But starting in your brain, I feel this tightness in your brain. And so I intuit that, like every intuitive is going to intuit this differently. But what I pick up on is like kind of stress and a lot to do. So there's this tightness, and we want it to relax and know there's plenty of space and time for everything. I feel like the brain could use a little more hydration, and it feels dusty in there in the sense of like, there's been some mold, and when you live in a moldy environment and the mold starts to dry out, there's that sensation in the brain. So I'm sure you've had some tests to see if you do have any fungus or mold, but that's showing up a little bit in the brain. I'm not highly concerned, but I don't know if you experience having a hard time hydrating, but it feels like that. Like maybe you drink, but your body's struggling to hydrate. One thing I've found that works with that is just doing a few granules of Celtic salt on the tongue, and the cells take in the water a little bit better. But there's almost like an offense to water. Like you drink water, but there's almost like an offense to it. And so that's a sidebar. That's kind of considered an allergy to water. And so we just do a brief healing on that so that your body could accept water a little bit better. As I come more deeply into like your ears, I love your ears. They're so open and receptive to hearing. I don't see this all the time. A lot of people, like, they at least have one side closed down. And that happens because there's someone that annoys them, or they used to get yelled at a lot, or they're trying to focus, but you're like wide open to not only hearing me, but like angels and different things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if you also have a strong sense of being clairaudient, which is fascinating.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Your third eye definitely looks like you have a block there, but it doesn't feel bad because it feels like you have this power in your other psychic senses. And so be patient. Over time, this will open, but you don't necessarily need it to, because these other senses are really well defined in you. Okay. So with the eyes, I think that you have some beliefs around things you don't want to see. Like there's some things you may not still want to see. And that's really common in the eyes, actually. I never went to a psychic until I was 36. I never saw a psychic. So I was like, what are they going to see? I don't know if I want to know what they have to say. It's scary, and I laid my hands on the table. She said, put your hands on the table. And I flopped my hands on the table, and she put her hands behind her back. And I'm like, oh my God, why is she afraid of me? And she goes, you're incredibly psychic. Like you're more psychic than me, and you should be doing something with this. And, another encouraging step. I was pregnant with my second and last child. Anyways, we carry a lot of fear in our eyes about what we might see intuitively, what we might see about ourselves, what we might see about someone else. And so as you start to clear those beliefs out, your vision actually gets better too.
Okay.
Kind of cool, right?
Yes, very cool.
The sinuses look a little bit blocked to me, and emotionally, sometimes that's related to sometimes grief and sometimes like guilt and shame. And so I just leave that up to your own interpretation. Your mouth comes through really strong. And when I say that, what I gather is that you're a really clear communicator. Even though you say you don't really like confrontation, but aside from that, your communication is very clear and concise and caring. And I really enjoy that about you. Your throat feels a little bit stuck to me, and that's where you might struggle to speak your truth sometimes, not to contradict what I just said, but each part of the body carries different kinds of energy. And the thyroid feels like it's a little bit off sometimes. And what I find in the thyroid is like people can be underexpressive, and then that builds up, and then they're overexpressive. A lot of times we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, so we kind of hold back our truth. There's all kinds of things going on for most people.
Yep.
As I come down the body more, I really like your breath. I'm really tuned into your breath. I don't know if you do breath work or if you like to be...
I'm so aware of trying to breathe into my belly and just use it as a power source of grounding. And I try to teach my kids that's always there for you. So I'm super aware of it. I can always do more, but I try to really be
This is the
intentional with it.
first time ever in my thousands and thousands of scans that I've noticed someone's breath. It's the first time I've ever felt it be so good and so flowing and so pure. So I like that you focus on that. It shows up in your body. It's good.
It's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So the heart is like the biggest tattletale for anybody. It holds tons of information, everything that's good about someone, and then what someone needs to work on. And so if I it's like, here's who this person is in the world, right? It carries that beautiful energy. And so if I just tune into your heart space, there's a deep desire to help, like very service oriented, showing up for anyone. Like people can call you and you show up, and you do it because you care, not because it's an obligation.
Yep, that feels accurate.
You're really spacious. Like if you're on a playground with your kiddos, you look around and you see what's good in this environment, what's good. Like a stranger, you build a story about what's good about them. This is a rare quality. You know, I think it was Einstein that said people will see the world one or two ways, that people are bad or that people are good. And that determines the outcome of the life that you're going to have. And you're at this playground and you're building these marvelous stories about how good people are, which is beautiful.
So weird that you just said that. Driving home yesterday, I was, on Houston's not very pretty. And we were driving around this really not pretty street, and there was this insane tree with these bright purple flowers. And I remember looking at that tree yesterday and thinking, if we could just look at that and didn't just like drive by it every day numb, people would be like in such awe of how neon this tree is. It
Yeah.
brings tears to my eyes. This is so annoying, but something about me in the past year or so, when I like say something that's true or hear something that's true, instead of getting goosebumps, I like tear up, which I have to be honest, for someone who doesn't like to cry, I cannot stand this thing about me. I don't like crying in public in front of people, but it happens. And so I was just like, when you were saying that, I was tearing up. Not because like I was like touched, well, it was, but also it's just I think that's my sign for truth. But anyway, I just had to
I want to
acknowledge
high
your.
five you. That's my sign for truth too.
Is it?
It is. Like
It's not fun.
I get chills and tears whew, when it's
I
like
don't
the
like
truth.
it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'd rather
love
have the
it because
goosebumps.
I love it because I'm like you. It's so hard to cry. I'm like, come on. I can feel there's tears. Come on. Let's, you've got this.
Like in private, cool. I'm cool with that. But when I'm on a podcast, it happens a lot because I'm like so emotionally involved and I'll just be like, I don't want to cry on here. But that's what happened when you were talking. And not a coincidence that happened actually yesterday. And it doesn't always happen, but I do try. And that's just so sweet to acknowledge. So thank you.
You're welcome. And so that would be the virtue of presence, right? And true
Mhm.
compassion and patience and tolerance, because if we don't have tolerance for humanity, it's really difficult to see the good in
Mm,
humanity, and there's a lot of good in humanity. So,
so true. We need to
yeah,
hold on to that.
so I think I can stop the scan there. People probably get a general sense. And so I just went, to the heart. Once I got to the throat, I just went sideways to the heart. And so if we were in session, out of what I saw today, I would address the sense of mold. I would address the inability to absorb water in the highest and best way. And I would address the throat chakra and the thyroid. If we scanned your body more, I might tune into other things that we do, but we tune into the emotional state of the mold and how your emotional state relates to that mold. And then we'd look, take that down the rabbit hole a little bit, and then we'd find the gifts in it and start to release things out of your body that you don't need anymore.
Well, we will be doing that with Rochelle. I will be calling you as soon as this ends because I can't tell you how accurate the water thing. Listen, I talk about water every day. I know how important it is. I do electrolytes, I do salt, I do all the things. There is something, and I am working on mineral balancing right now and metal releasing. So I think that has to do with the absorption on the physical plane. But something is happening with me in water because I have no thirst most of the time, and it's a fight for me to get water in. So I mean, just being completely transparent. I talk about this all the time and it's just something going on. So I'm excited to dive into that. It's completely accurate. And then we've had mold in our house before and we've cleaned it out, but we're doing some touch up work. And where it was cracking, where we have to repaint, I found you said dust in my brain. It's actually looks like dust. And I know in my heart of hearts, that's mold that we have to take care of. So, wow, and can't wait to clear that up energetically as well because that is not something I like dealing with. And anyway, that beautifully accurate, and also can't wait to address it. And that's the amazingness of this work is that there's just so many layers to everything. And if you feel like you can be making progress physically, but get some insight that you might just not see and work on it at the root where a lot of this is energetic and emotional, the healing is faster and more powerful. I really believe that. So that's what I'm hoping. I'm so excited that I have this and that I'm open to it, but I'm also hoping so much that this is going to help other people see if you're not making progress, let's look at another angle, right? It's
Yeah.
not just about more supplements. It's not just about always detoxing, which that's what I do and love. But really, really wanted to express that. So I think you did it beautifully. And thank you for that scan. It was really, really special. And
You're welcome.
it got to speak for itself.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me on. I really enjoy your energy and your breath.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Thank you for your time and your gifts. And yeah, for being here today. I'm just really, really grateful. And we'll have to have you back. After we follow up on these things, we'll show people what happened.
Sounds great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Have a
Take
beautiful
care.
day.
Bye.